There's a lot of debate here, a lot of people from the centre-right side of politics saying that if we are going to commit to net zero or reduced emissions, then we really need to develop a nuclear strategy. What you're saying is that the urgency is greater than ever, because if it takes 7 years to get one installed, then we'd better get cracking.
I find it interesting that Australia has a prohibition on nuclear power, particularly because you are the third largest producer of uranium on the planet, which is the energy source for nuclear power. And now you're going to be the 7th nation to pursue nuclear submarines, but you're the only nation that doesn't have a civil program. It makes no sense to me that a country that's pursuing nuclear submarines would not have a civil program to support it. And the fact is, when you look at what we've tried to do since the Paris Climate Accord, where we've allowed renewable energy unfettered access to capital, subsidies, legislation. I mean, I would argue that since the Paris Climate Accord, we have done everything we can on this planet to produce reliable, renewable energy, and we simply have not been successful. And the fact is, we haven't displaced 1 kilowatt of fossil fuel use for energy since the Paris Climate Accord. So what you saw at COP26 last year was a reckoning that natural gas and nuclear power must be brought into the clean energy conversation. Otherwise, we will never achieve any of the climate goals that were set.
Well, let's talk about the safety of nuclear, because there is Australia has almost been spooked by, you know, the negative implications of nuclear. But when you look at the cost in lives of producing energy from fossil fuels, from renewables, and from nuclear, across the entire production process, nuclear is the safest, isn't it? Is that right?
It's absolutely the safest. And when you think about reducing the carbon footprint, and the one area that I think we are all in agreement on is that areas that are heavily polluted with large coal-fired plants kill people. And it's pretty straightforward. Now, you can argue climate change, but the thing we want to focus on is pollution. And when you compare a coal-fired plant to a nuclear plant, in terms of how safe they are to build, how reliable they are, nuclear power is far and away the safest form of energy. And there have been sensationalized arguments against nuclear power with Fukushima or 3 Mile Island or Chernobyl. But in fact, at Fukushima, for example, in Japan, not a single person was killed because of radiation. It was the tsunami. But there's a sensationalism to nuclear power. And I would argue that if you believe in climate change or the concern about the carbon or the Celsius temperature rise around the planet, then you should embrace nuclear power as a reliable source of energy. In the United States, for example, 20% of our energy is produced by nuclear power, but it's over 50% of our clean energy. And that's after a decade of renewable energy development. So for Australia to think about abundant baseload and clean energy, you have to think of all three. You can't just focus on clean at the expense of abundant and baseload. So I think, rightfully so, it's time for this debate to occur in Australia.